Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today for this exciting discussion on navigating change with grace and grit. And let me tell you, we have an amazing panel of women leaders who will share their different perspectives and insights on dealing with the challenges that come with change. Sitting next to me, we have Melanie Brook, Creative Principal, Operations at LegalZoom, Christina Carr, Head of Marketing Programs at Airtable, and Kate Daggett, Global Head of Creative at Square. So let's get right to it. So the past few quarters have been tough. Can I see a show of hands in the audience at who has faced tighter budgets, uncertainty, leaner teams? Wow. Yes, it's definitely been a lot. And with that, I'd love to get started by asking you, Kate, how have you navigated and nurtured creative performance? How have you kept things moving?
It's a great question. Hi, everyone. These are certainly turbulent times, and when teams are facing tumult and turbulent times, I like to nurture creative performance in two main ways. The first is at a team level. It's really easy for our teams to get distracted by the chaos and the swirl that's happening around them. So I always find that it's helpful to create a vision for the team to focus around. A vision gives purpose and meaning to the work that they're doing. And without a vision, no one from my team is here, although if they were, they'd be sick of hearing me say this. But I find that without a vision, we are but a rowboat in a tumultuous ocean that's being thrashed around by the circumstances around us. But with a vision, it provides the opportunity to galvanize the team and have them work towards a future state and towards progress. Effectively, it acts as like a compass that can pave a path forward. And so that with a vision to look towards, it means that teams are less likely to get swept up in the tides of chaos, and they can come together to work towards something more efficiently and effectively. At a project level, I like to nurture creative performance through embracing constraints. I think that there's a real beauty and magic that comes to problems and constraints, and every project is riddled with challenges. Someone on your team has unexpectedly gone out on leave. Budgets were cut. The strategy's wrong. The media plan changed. Like, you name it. Timeline shift, right? So, but instead of thinking like, oh my God, this sucks, this has ruined everything, like if we rally around the constraints and embrace the constraints and enjoy the challenges and the problems, it forces us, it's an amazing forcing function for innovation and for us to solve problems differently. And think about like COVID in this remote world, suddenly we had to figure out how we were gonna do remote production without seeing people, and Square produced some of its most exceptional and creative work during that period of time by embracing the constraints. And so I say, like, wrap your arms around pressure and enjoy it, because pressure creates diamonds. So that's how I like to nurture creative performance.
That's really inspiring, Kate. It's great to hear how out of adversity, teams can develop grit and produce their best work. And Melanie, I'm sure this resonates with you a bit, recently joining LegalZoom. How have you kept things moving and tackled this uncertainty that we're facing now?
Yeah, I'm going to move this closer because I can't talk very loud. So I like to reduce uncertainty in two ways. One is through consistency and predictability in all the things that I do have control over. And then another is through early and often communication. I think we spend the vast majority of our time at work, right? So although we can't change all the things around us that are uncertain, we have a huge amount of influence over the certainty that we can provide the work experience for our teams. And we can do this through meeting cadences or like general project flows. I think if people know what their workload is going to look like for the next day or the next week, it provides a level of security and stability and predictability for them, and it removes some of those like uncertain blocks. I feel like when you show up to work and you have no idea what the day is going to hold, that's just adding to the overall uncertainty that everyone's feeling in life, and nobody needs that. So I try to eliminate uncertainty as much as I can through structure and sometimes providing self-imposed constraints, like Kate mentioned. And then the other one is through early and often communication. So inevitably things are going to change, but if you wait until the monthly team all hands meeting to share information, then it almost feels like old news, or it feels like you think that your leaders are holding out information on you. Like, I just want to know the day it happens. Or even weekly announcements. I want to keep the communication channels open as much as possible so that our team trusts that we're going to share information once we have it. And then also, they already have that comfortable dialogue with you so that they feel comfortable to talk about it when the change does come.
Thanks, Melanie. Communication is such an important role in dealing with uncertainty. And with that, Christina, I'd love to know your thoughts around the role communication plays in successfully navigating change, and how can teams ensure they're communicating effectively during times of transition?
Yeah, this is probably the thing I think about the most, day in and day out. I think for my team and for me as like an ops-focused team, I definitely lean less towards the Kate approach and work with the Kates of the world. So it's much about, keeping the train on the tracks, making things smoother, making them faster, and making them easier. Easier is the operative word that I use when I communicate. So I think creating that consistency, like Melanie said, and keeping things moving is super important. So we have communication methods that we do every day. We have weekly ones and we have monthly ones. And sometimes it feels like you're being noisy, but even if 5 people care, that's the way to do it. So I think that's really important. I think when there's external swirl and uncertainty, whether it's in the market, whether it's with the strategic direction of your company, whether you're experiencing layoffs, just having reliable communication, I know this is going to happen at 2 o'clock every Tuesday, brings a sense of comfort, right? So even if it's not the information, it's the voice and it's hearing the folks speaking. I think the other thing is how to focus on business impact all the time. It might change, whatever the impact might be. For me, that's what all communication should hinge on. So yes, there's project communication, but when you're talking to an entire team, or when you are an ops team talking to a bunch of teams that sometimes don't want to hear from you, you have to tell them why they're important, right? What are you doing that's going to keep them engaged in the work that they're doing when they could really easily be on LinkedIn, looking at all their friends and what's going on in their companies. So for me, it's what can I serve up for the team, either continuously, reliably, or even one-time communications that keeps them rooted on what they're trying to do, rooted on what the impact is, and just creating kind of that sense of normalcy.
Absolutely. Business impact plays such a critical role in fostering team productivity, collaboration, and ultimately producing customer-centric products and services. And I'd actually like to stay with you, Christina, and hear your perspective on how, with a steady flow of content and leaner teams to execute, what are some crucial skill sets needed for strategic decision-making to avoid bottlenecks?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I think it's different, right? Depending on where you are. So my lens on this right now is I work at a later stage privately owned company, right? So there's demands that we have that other folks who might work on a publicly owned company are different. So for me, lean, laser focused all the time, and constant awareness of just the internal and the external landscape. Those are in this kind of tumult, I guess you would say. Those are the critical skill sets that I try to root everything in. So there's 3 things that we focus on. One of them is enabling the entire team to understand what their partners do. You can't just be an expert on a lean team, right? So you really need to understand what your impact is on their skill set and what their impact can be on yours, which leads into how are they critically thinking about the problems at hand? It can't just be a step-by-step. Every time we do this thing, these are the 5 steps we take. If we have to be laser focused and we have to be lean, we have to be creative and think about how we do those things, connecting those dots, and then, again, communication, right? How do we talk to each other? You can't always speak your own language. A creative can't always talk to, an email marketer in creative speak, and an email marketer cannot always talk to a strategist in, Marketo, right? So there's different things there that we try to enable the team with. And then the last thing, which is what I just said, is what's big picture thinking, right? How do we get people to be able to root on that big picture while staying flexible? So it's definitely, where we focus most of our time, my team, is how do we enable the team to understand the big picture and to be able to have some flex in what they're doing, and then to know when to do that and when not to do it. So it's a big ask, but with a lean and a real laser focus, it's the way we have to operate, I think.
Yeah, those are some great insights. And Melanie, I'd love to ask you, at LegalZoom, how do you triage work with in-house talent, agencies, contractors, and freelancers? Any tips you can share for integrating vendors into your workflows?
Yeah, so I'll separate those to two questions if that's okay. And our team is small, so I'm typically a minimalist in my life, but when it comes to creative resources, I'm like, gimme, gimme, gimme. I want as many as I can get. And that doesn't always necessarily mean more people. Sometimes it just means going deeper into the skill sets of the people we already have. Maybe utilizing a skill set that an agency that you're partnering with has that you haven't used before. Just expanding that pool of resources so that you have a lot of people onboarded to your brand so you're ready at a moment's notice, because heaven knows that's always necessary. So I typically save large projects for agencies because our team is really small. So it's hard for us to handle end-to-end a project with just our team. And the nice thing about an agency is that depending on the agency, they usually have a small army of resources that they can pull in at a moment's notice, and then they also have a wide variety of skill sets. So if you have something that requires copy, design, and animation, they can do the project end-to-end, whereas that would be really cumbersome if you did it with freelancers because, I mean, you could get a freelancer that does copy, design, and animation, right? But then the ops person is struggling because logistically it's a lot more complicated and requires a lot more hand-holding. So that's typically how I save projects for agencies. But then freelancers are my go-to for projects that our team internally can't handle because of bandwidth or skill set when the project is pretty contained and requires maybe only one skill set. Because as I mentioned, it's kind of cumbersome to work with multiple different freelancers on one project. And then in-house, it's really hard to beat the contextual information and the industry-specific know-how that your internal team has. Like that just takes so much time that those people have invested in that information. So the way that I've actually scaled my internal team, which I'm pretty excited about recently, is I've used them as briefers and reviewers. So typically I brief everything as the project manager or creative ops person, but now I brought in our copywriter. I'm actually doing this with Brainrider right now. We needed 30 or 40 video scripts written in a short amount of time. And again, we have one video script writer on hand. So that's a lot of work for somebody to crank out in a small amount of time. So we sent it over to Brainrider. And then our internal video script expert, she briefed the writers on it, and then she's reviewing all their work. So the industry-specific know-how is all still retained, but we are utilizing the small army of somebody else to really expand our capacity to create more work. And then the question you asked about integrating them into your workflow. So again, as a small team, I'm just trying to make things as easy as possible. I think you guys said the same thing, easy is the key word. So if you have a different work process with every kind of vendor that you work with, your life is gonna be crazy. But if you can really integrate them in your tools, whether that be your Slack channel, I think that's huge, or Figma if you don't have the crazy SSO regulations that we do. If you have the luck to include them in your project management tool, that is ideal, but sometimes that's not an option. Just really, the more that you could get them in their tool and the more you can treat them like an internal team, the better, at least selfishly for the ops people.
It's great to hear your different tools, resources, and strategies for getting work done. And with that, Christina, I know you and I were chatting earlier today about how you're leveraging AI with resourcing. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's, look, you can't exist today without someone talking to you about AI. Every tool, including Airtable, is releasing some sort of AI plugin. I think for us, it's been trying to figure out, AI is not new, right? Like, we've all talked about automation for years and years and years. So figuring out what is new in AI that allows me to automate in a way that is even faster and even smarter, right? So again, with a lean team, just figuring out, some things we play with is what are things that I don't have the luxury of having as many project managers as I used to have, right? Different environment. I don't have a huge freelancer budget at the moment. So what can I do with AI that doesn't replace a project manager, because it's not robots, right? They're not becoming the people, but it's what are the steps that I can look at in a process that truly one thing kicks off the next, kicks off the next. So we've been really looking at AI there. We've been looking at how we can even simple things, like I was just talking to someone in the exhibition hall around meeting notes. Like, I'm so used to having like, here's what an agenda template looks like, here's what meeting notes look like. It's actually important, right? Like when you're reviewing something and figuring out how to leverage AI to pull out themes across 12 meetings in a row, that takes 5 minutes when it would take me like 3 hours to read through those. So we've been doing a lot of that with our team to try to connect dots that really is just difficult to connect on our own. We're playing with it in our own tools, right? So it's in like an alpha version for us. So we're also making a lot of mistakes when we're doing AI. So it like lends itself to how much experimentation you can do. But the automation thing is key for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to use innovation and experimentation to support efficiency, right? And Kate, with that, I'd love to hear how you're balancing innovation and experimentation with the need for stability and consistency in creative production.
Well, it's certainly a balance. Every brand right now is looking to differentiate themselves with innovative ideas and stand out amidst a really crowded marketplace. At the same time, every brand is looking for cost savings and efficiency and trying to templatize as much as they can so that they have scale. And these two things sometimes are at odds with one another. And so first, the first way of creating consistency and efficiency is through building the proverbial machine, right? These are trusted partners, like Brainrider was for us at Meta, trusted processes, trusted tools, like pulling your partners into the same Figma file or adding them to your Slack channels, and just building some really fluid operational models that keep the ships running and the trains running on time and consistently. At the same time, we need to constantly be testing and learning and iterating and innovating and asking what if and being curious and inventing things. Otherwise, we're not going to be relevant. Our brands won't be relevant, our teams won't be relevant, the work won't be relevant. So it's a really delicate balance between those things to balance the scale and the efficiency that you need with the constant desire to iterate and innovate and create. And a great example of this is the second that visual generative AI came on the scene, Midjourney, DALL-E, our production and creative teams immediately started tinkering and playing with it to see how we could use these tools to breathe new life into existing assets and squeeze the value and the life out of every single piece of content that we had created up to that point. I work for Square, we have hardware, we do the most beautiful hardware shoots. But our hardware gets updated, just like the iPhone does, right? And so we have these amazing, gorgeous, luxe photos with old hardware. And we're like, oh my God, now we've got to do a whole new shoot. But wait, now we don't. We can actually 3D render our new products and drop them right into this beautiful photography that still looks really relevant. And so we've been able to breathe new life into existing assets and get more out of the longevity of our assets while paving completely and entirely new production models for the future, which is really exciting. And doing it all at a scale and a pace and a cost that never before was possible. So if you balance underpin innovation, creativity, curiosity with really strong operational models, then you can strike a perfect balance.
It's a tall order, but you're balancing it. And Christina, what has worked for you?
Yeah, I think what's interesting that Kate brings up is it is around what do you have that's steady that allows you to do the thing that maybe doesn't feel as steady. So for us, what's worked really well is a little goes a long way for us, right? So carving out the areas where we can experiment, being very upfront when you cannot experiment too, right? So I find nobody likes to approach, comms here's what you can't do, but you have to know what you're telling them that they can't do every single time. So for us, it's been, we work off of a plan, right? We're not an intake system. We are really at a 95-5 planned versus unplanned activity space. So it's very easy for us during planning to say, and this is somewhere where we want to give these two folks on the creative team, or 10% of the work, or 20% of how we work with a vendor, time for experimentation, right? So that's one way that we do that. The other thing is how do we give people time to have a little bit of side projects or passion projects for
Yeah.
experimentation. We do that with any of our teams that work on sprints. We carve out a week, right, where they are allowed to just work on passion projects, and we know there's going to be no releases that week. We're going to move our entire schedule around that. Yeah, things come up, but it's been a practice that we do. And I think some of the best work after that comes out of what folks experiment with, right? So it really is like, give this much time and everything, it breathes life into everything else that they're doing.
Those are some great points that both you and Kate raise, and I know that having had the opportunity to work with both of you on Work for Meta, I've always appreciated your ability to balance innovation and experimentation against all types of constraints. And we have got a few more minutes left, so I'd love to ask each of you, from your experience, what qualities and skills do you believe a leader should possess to effectively navigate times of change with grace and grit? Kate, I'd love to start with you.
It's a really good question, Michelle. These are turbulent times, and so I think having both grace and grit in a leadership position is really important. And I find that some of the strongest leaders shine not in their ability to command, but in their ability to listen. Change is really hard, and whether it's organizational change, layoffs, budget cuts, title changes, whatever those changes are, they can be very difficult for individuals, and it can take a really long time to settle. So if you're a leader who's able to lean in with empathy and listen to the tenor of the whole team as well as the individuals, then it gives you an opportunity to meet them where they are and provide them the guidance and the inspiration that they need to feel like they really understand the value of their role in the greater vision and organization that they're working in.
And Christina, your thoughts?
Similar to what Kate says, I think there's this element of being a leader where you really have to know what your strengths are. And you have to know when to lean in with your strengths and know when to maybe not lean in with what's not your strength and leverage your partner, right? Like being able to work with other leaders on your team with that same level of empathy that you would have protecting your team is really important as a leader. I think that's how we eliminate silos, that's how we create efficiency, that's what good collaboration looks like. And I think that as a leader in a creative team, in an operations team, on a production team, you talk to everybody. So like you can really have that ability to understand what other folks' strengths are and when to pull them in and when to make that a partnership instead of just a kind of one woman show with what you're doing. I think the other one thing that I think is really important in being a leader in like this space today is to remember that people have other things going on all the time. Yeah. So like your job might be crazy, your business might be crazy, your industry might be crazy, the market certainly is crazy, but you don't know what everybody else is doing. So I think there's this level of empathy, like Kate points out, that just like meet people where they are and really understand like that not everybody is leaning in when you're leaning in. Not everybody's urgent priority is your urgent priority. And I think that's really important, especially, today as we navigate whatever you're navigating.
Navigate all the change.
All the things.
And Melanie.
Yeah, I would say that commonalities that I've seen between leaders who navigate this really well are patience and pragmatism. And I say pragmatism because, as they mentioned, everybody's navigating the change by themselves, and so you have to really go with the flow and not take things personally because you're not really sure what exactly other people are navigating. We know the macroeconomic elements, right? But we don't know the individual, if that person's kid was sick that day or whatever. And then patience with yourself and others as we go through the change, because we're not going to get it right the first time, and so we need to practice that empathy and have patience with ourselves and our teams and our partners as we all figure out how to work in the new space.
Those are all great points. Thank you, Kate, Christina, and Melanie for sharing. And just, based off the discussion we've had today, I'd just love to open the floor up to each of you and ask, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Oh God, the pressure.
Final thoughts.
I just think, it's parroting back what everyone has said, but listening is really crucial, meeting the teams where they are, and also recognizing that, it's okay as a leader to be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable with your team. It just as, well, both of you were saying, like, you have no idea what's going on in other people's lives. And as a leader, if you're able to open up and share and be like, I had a really bad day. Like, my son was up vomiting all last night, and I got a flat tire, and I'm really feeling very frazzled. And like, it just makes people connect with you as a human being and gives them a little bit more grace to understand that you're going through some personal things, and they become less, they're softer with their expectations. So I think vulnerability is really important.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're all people. Actually, Kate was going to come to an event that we had on Tuesday, and she wasn't able to make it because, not only with juggling work and life, her son was sick. And so I think just...
He was up all night vomiting.
knowing that it's important. So thank you for sharing that, Kate. So that is all we have time for today. It's been a fantastic discussion. Huge thank you to Henry Stewart and Brainrider for helping us to have this conversation, and to Kate, Melanie, and Christina for sharing their insights and perspectives. I hope you all found it as inspiring as I did. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.